The sun had barely risen over the endless plains, painting the sky in streaks of blood orange and gold. The wind whispered across the dry grasses, carrying the faint scent of gunpowder and fear. Out on the dusty main street of Dry Creek, a crowd had gathered. They weren't here for the sunrise, they were here for a spectacle. And at the center of it all, shackled to a post, stood a woman. Her eyes were defiant, even as the iron bit into her wrists and the chains dug into her ankles. The townsfolk murmured among themselves, some sneering, some whispering prayers under their breath. She was the warning, the lesson, the shame of someone who had dared cross the wrong people. Yet standing there, framed by the harsh light, she seemed to rise above their judgment. Then a shadow moved at the edge of the street. A lone rider, boots dusty, hat low, and spurs jangling with each step, cut through the haze. He was the kind of man the legends were whispered about in saloons and campfires, the kind who walked the line between law and outlaw, yet somehow always on the side of justice, or at least his own brand of it. His eyes met hers, and for a heartbeat the world seemed to stop. The crowd didn't notice him at first. Their attention was fixed on the woman, chained and trembling, a mix of anger and fear flickering across her face. But the moment the cowboy drew closer, his presence cut through the murmurs. You could hear it in the creak of the wooden boards beneath his horse, the soft hiss of leather as he adjusted his coat. She swallowed, lips dry, throat tight, and then, almost impossibly, she whispered, loud enough for him alone to hear, "Take me!" The words rode the wind, a fragile thread of hope daring him to answer. The cowboy's jaw clenched. He didn't move immediately. He studied the crowd, their faces painted with shock, scorn, and curiosity. Every eye followed him. Some reached for weapons, hands twitching near holsters. But the cowboy didn't flinch. Slowly, deliberately, he tipped his hat back and gave a crooked grin. "You don't give orders to me, miss," he said, his voice low, carrying the weight of calm authority. "But I'll make sure you ain't shackled by fools for much longer." The crowd gasped, whispers turning into murmurs of disbelief. The local sheriff, a burly man with a red face and a temper shorter than a rattlesnake's tail, strode forward. "Step away, stranger," he barked, but the cowboy didn't budge. The tension snapped like a dry branch. One man laughed nervously, thinking to provoke the stranger. But the cowboy's hand hovered over his revolver, not in threat, but in promise. The kind of promise that only a man who had seen the worst in men could make. The kind that said, "Don't push me," or regret it forever. And then it happened. The woman shifted her weight, the chains rattling. The first link snapped, almost as if in answer to the silent challenge between them. A collective gasp rolled through the crowd. The sheriff's face went redder. "I said step back!" He roared, but it was too late. With a swift motion, the cowboy dismounted, boots crunching against the dust. He was a blur of movement, fast, precise, and merciless. The chain that bound her hands clanged as he worked it open, and she flexed her wrists, testing the freedom that had been so long denied. "You got guts," he muttered, glancing up at her with a faint smirk. "But you're lucky I'm not here for a hanging." Her lips curved into a smile, faint but triumphant. "Luck or fate?" she asked, her voice steadier now. Before the sheriff could react, the cowboy grabbed her arm and together they bolted toward the edge of town. The crowd erupted into shouts, some cheering, some cursing, as dust clouds billowed behind them. Horses neighing, boots pounding against the dirt, hearts racing. Every step of the escape was a dance with death. They ducked into the narrow alleyways, shadows stretching long across weathered brick and wooden shutters. The sheriff and his deputies were fast, but the cowboy was faster, moving with a grace that belied the harshness of his rugged exterior. He didn't just ride. He seemed to flow, weaving through obstacles as if the land itself obeyed him. Finally, they reached a ridge overlooking the valley beyond. The sun had climbed higher now, burning bright against the horizon. She was breathing hard, hair matted with dust and sweat. But her eyes glimmered with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "You okay?" he asked, voice rough but gentle. "I've been worse," she said, and for the first time, there was a laugh, light and free, breaking the tension that had gripped her for so long. The cowboy nodded. "Good. We don't have much time." He lifted her onto the horse behind him, hands steady and confident. She clung to him, and for a moment, the chains of her past seemed to fall away entirely. As they rode into the open plains, the wind whipping against their faces, the town of Dry Creek shrank behind them, a speck in the distance. The world ahead was wide, uncharted, dangerous, but it was theirs. For the first time, she felt the thrill of freedom, raw and intoxicating. Hours passed, dust and shadows blurring together, until they reached a creek hidden among the rocks and trees. Here the cowboy stopped. They dismounted, and he led her to the water, letting her drink deeply. "You've got fire," he said, studying her face. "Most people would have cowered. Most people would have begged for mercy." "I didn't ask for mercy," she said softly, meeting his gaze. "I asked for someone to see me, someone who could fight." He smiled, faint, approving. "Then you picked the right man." The sun dipped lower, and the sky turned shades of violet and crimson. For a moment the world seemed to hold its breath. No town, no law, no chains, just two people standing at the edge of the wilderness, the future stretching out endlessly before them. "You ever do this before?" she asked, a hint of mischief in her tone. "Depends on what you mean," he said, eyes scanning the horizon. "Depends on who's worth the risk." A laugh escaped her, unrestrained this time. It felt good, honest, unburdened. "Then I guess I'm lucky." The cowboy mounted his horse again, helping her up behind him. Together they rode into the fading light, dust swirling around their boots, the wind carrying their defiance like a banner across the plains. They were fugitives, outlaws, rebels, but they were alive. And in that wild, untamed land, alive was everything. And somewhere deep in the valley, where the shadows stretched long and the prairie whispered secrets to the wind, a new legend was born, one of courage, of rebellion, and of a woman who dared to demand freedom, and the cowboy who answered her call. The stars began to prick the sky, tiny points of light in the vast, endless dark. She leaned against him, exhausted but unbroken, and whispered, almost to herself, "Thank you." He tipped his hat back, a faint grin playing on his lips. "Ain't nothing to thank me for. We're just getting started." The night swallowed them, dust and darkness mingling, the horizon wide open, and the promise of adventure stretching beyond sight. For in the Wild West, every ending was just another beginning, and for these two, the story had only just begun.